The morning air in the Galactic Combat Academy smelled like ozone and metal. G1 stood in the weapons hall, surrounded by creatures that made her feel impossibly small. To her left, a Vrexian named Caldrus checked his gravity hammer. The weapon hummed with power, and Caldrus himself stood nearly 8 feet tall with arms thick as tree trunks. To her right, a seraph called Veltara stretched her 4 arms, each one holding a different blade. Her species moved like water, fast and impossible to predict. G-1 looked down at the plasma rifle in her own hands. It felt wrong. The grip was too wide for her fingers. The weight distribution pulled her forward. The trigger required pressure her index finger couldn't provide without her whole hand shaking. She'd been training with this weapon for 3 weeks now, and every day ended the same way. Failure. Combat positions. Commander Thexal's voice boomed across the hall. The Vrexian instructor's scales gleamed under the harsh lights. His eyes, cold and yellow, swept across the cadets. Today's assessment is simple. Maintain control of your weapon under duress. Lose your weapon, you fail. G1's heart hammered in her chest. She had failed this test twice before. One more failure, and she would be removed from combat training entirely. Around her, the other cadets moved into formation with confidence. They had been born for this. Their bodies, their instincts, everything about them was designed for war. Humans were not. The simulation began. Holographic enemies materialized around them, moving fast and aggressive. Caldrus swung his gravity hammer in a wide arc, and 3 enemies dissolved into pixels. Veltara became a blur of motion, her 4 blades creating a defensive sphere that nothing could penetrate. A crystalline Hector named Zarn stood like a statue, his energy gauntlets humming as he shattered anything that came close. G1 raised her plasma rifle and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her backwards. Her shot went wide, missing the hologram by several feet. She adjusted her stance and tried again. This time, the rifle's safety engaged because her grip wasn't firm enough. The weapon beeped an error code. Then Veltara was in front of her. The Seraph moved so fast that G1 barely saw her coming. 2 of Veltara's hands locked onto the plasma rifle, while the other 2 positioned blades at G1's throat. The simulation froze. Disarmed in 4 seconds, Thexal announced. His voice carried disappointment but not surprise. A new record low, Cadet G1. Laughter rippled through the hall. Not cruel exactly, but not kind either. It was the laughter of people watching someone trying to do something they clearly couldn't. Veltara released the rifle and stepped back, her face showing something that might have been pity. Again, Thexal ordered G1 picked up the rifle. Her hands were shaking now. She took her position and waited for the simulation to restart. This time, she lasted 7 seconds before a holographic enemy struck the weapon from her hands. Then 5 seconds. Then 3. After the 6th attempt, Thexal called an end to the assessment. Cadet G1, front and center. She walked to stand before him, acutely aware of every eye in the hall watching her. Her hands were bruised from the rifle's recoil. Her shoulders ached from trying to control a weapon not designed for human anatomy. I've reviewed your scores across all weapon categories, Thexal said. He pulled up a holographic display. Red marks filled every column. Plasma rifle, inadequate. Energy blade, inadequate. Projectile systems, inadequate. Close combat weapons, inadequate. He looked at her directly. You understand what this means. I can improve, G1 said. Give me more time. Time is not the issue. Biology is. Thexal gestured to the other cadets. The Vrexians have enhanced muscle density and thermal resistance that allows them to wield high-energy weapons. The Seraphs have multiple limbs and heightened reflexes. The Hectors can manipulate molecular bonds. Every species in this academy has evolved traits that make them natural warriors. He paused. Humans have not. But Admiral Borum is human, G1 said. She commands an entire fleet. Admiral Borum is an exceptional strategist and leader. She does not engage in frontline combat. Dexal's voice was not unkind, just matter of fact. Some species are builders. Some are diplomats. Some are warriors. There is no shame in accepting what you are. The words hit harder than any physical blow. G1 wanted to argue, to prove him wrong, but the evidence was displayed in bright red across the holographic screen. She had failed every test. She couldn't handle the weapons. Her body wasn't built for this. You are reassigned to the logistics division effective immediately, Dexal continued. Report to the equipment warehouse tomorrow morning. Your service to the academy will be valuable, just not in combat. G1 managed a nod. Speaking felt impossible. Around her, the other cadets were already moving on, discussing their own scores, planning their next training sessions. To them, she had already disappeared. That night, G1 sat in the equipment warehouse where she would now spend her days. Rows of weapons surrounded her, organized by species and function. Rexian thermal lances, Seraph molecular disruptors, Hector resonance gauntlets, human plasma rifles, gathering dust because there were so few humans at the academy, and most of them had already washed out of combat training. She picked up one of the rifles and took it apart, piece by piece. The components were elegant, perfectly designed for their purpose, just not for human hands. The grip required fingers spaced wider than human anatomy allowed. The weight distribution assumed a center of gravity that humans didn't have. The trigger mechanism needed a strength that human index fingers couldn't provide without compromising aim. Every weapon in this warehouse told the same story. They were designed by species who had evolved for war, for species who had evolved for war. Humans had evolved for something else. Entirely. G1's eyes moved from the weapons to the other equipment stored in the warehouse. Supply crates made from lightweight alloys. Maintenance panels constructed from flexible metals. Furniture from the old administration wing replaced last year with newer models. Standard titanium alloy desks that could withstand weapons, fire but remain light enough for easy transport. She walked over to one of the desks and ran her hand along its surface. The metal was cool, smooth, and perfectly ordinary. Just a desk. Just furniture. Not a weapon at all. But as G1 stood there in the silence of the warehouse, surrounded by weapons she would never be allowed to use, an idea began to form. It was small at first, barely more than a whisper in the back of her mind. But it grew. Her hands, the instructor said, were too small for war. Too weak, too human. But human hands had built cities. Human hands had created tools. Human hands had reshaped the world around them for hundreds of thousands of years. Maybe the problem wasn't her hands. Maybe the problem was trying to use weapons designed for someone else. G-1 pulled the desk closer and examined its construction. Memory metal alloy, designed to flex under pressure or return to its original shape. She pressed her thumb against one corner and watched it bend, then slowly spring back. What if she didn't need their weapons at all? What if she could make her own? The idea was crazy, impossible. But as G1 stood alone in that warehouse, labeled too weak for combat, she decided that impossible was better than giving up. She had been called unarmed by the academy. Tomorrow, she would start proving them wrong. 3 weeks passed in the warehouse, and G1 fell into a routine that felt like surrender. She processed equipment requests, organized shipments, and tried not to think about the combat training happening in the halls above her. Sometimes she heard the distant sounds of weapons fire or the thud of bodies hitting training mats. Each sound was a reminder of where she wasn't. The other logistics workers were kind enough. Most were from species deemed unsuitable for combat, just like her. They didn't talk about fighting or weapons or glory. They talked about inventory counts and shipping schedules, and which supply vendors offered the best prices. Safe topics. Boring topics. G1 hated every minute of it. She started staying late in the warehouse after the other workers left. Officially, she was catching up on paperwork. Unofficially, she was taking apart every weapon she could get her hands on. Not to use them, that was forbidden. But to understand them, to see how they worked. Every weapon told a story about the species that created it. Rexian thermal lances had cooling systems built into the grip because Rexian hands generated enormous heat. Seraph blades were balanced for 4-point grip patterns. Hector gauntlets channeled energy through crystalline pathways that matched their species' internal structure. Not a single weapon in the entire arsenal was designed for human hands. The realization should have been discouraging, but instead, it clarified something in G1's mind. The problem wasn't that humans were weak. The problem was that humans were trying to fight like they were something else. On a Friday evening, G1 sat in the mostly empty commissary, picking at food she wasn't hungry for. The room was quiet, except for one other person. A human man sitting 2 tables away with a cup of tea and a frustrated expression. Dr. Tiemann? G1 recognized him from academy briefings. He was the human astrophysicist assigned to the research division, one of only 5 humans on the entire station. He looked up, seeming grateful for the interruption. Please, just Tiemann. And you're G1, right? I heard about the combat training situation. I'm sorry. G1 shrugged, not trusting herself to speak without bitterness creeping into her voice. May I? Tiemann gestured to the seat across from her. When she nodded, he sat down with a heavy sigh. I was just sitting here thinking about how much I hate the furniture in this place. Despite everything, G1 almost smiled. The furniture? Everything is designed for species with completely different body structures. The chairs expect 6 legs. The desks are built for people 3 times my height. The door handles are positioned for arms that bend in 3 places. He took a sip of his tea. I spend half my time adapting to their designs instead of doing actual work. Do you know what we would do on Earth? What? We'd redesign the furniture. Taemin's eyes lit up the way scientists' eyes did when they found a problem to solve. That's what humans have always done. We don't adapt to the environment. We adapt the environment to us. We build chairs that fit our bodies. We create tools that work with our hands. We reshape the world to match what we need. The words hit G1 like a physical force. She stared at Taemin, her mind racing. That's it, she whispered. What's it? I've been trying to adapt to their weapons. But what if I don't need to? G1 stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. What if I make my own? Taemin blinked. I'm not sure I follow. But G1 was already moving, her food forgotten, her mind spinning with possibilities. She thanked Taemin and practically ran back to the warehouse. Once there, she stood among the discarded furniture from the old administration wing and really looked at it for the first time. The desks, the panels, the storage crates, all made from the same memory metal alloy that could flex and bend, but always returned to its original shape. All light enough to move easily, but strong enough to withstand weapons fire. All completely ignored because they were just furniture. G1 dragged one of the desks to a clear area and studied its construction. The metal was a flat sheet folded into a specific shape to create the desk form. If she could unfold it, reshape it, and fold it differently, she started carefully, using basic tools from the maintenance kit. The first attempt was a disaster. The metal bent in ways she didn't expect, and when she tried to force it back, it snapped. But memory metal was self-healing to a degree. She left it overnight and found it had partially restored itself by morning. The second attempt was better. She learned to work with the metal's natural flexibility instead of against it. She started seeing folding patterns, ways the metal wanted to bend. It reminded her of something from Earth, something old, origami. The art of paper folding. G1 had learned basic origami as a child, making cranes and boxes from colored paper. The principles were simple. A flat surface could become three-dimensional through strategic folds. A single sheet of paper could become a bird, a flower, a star. What if the same principles applied to metal? She spent every night experimenting. The memory metal was more forgiving than she expected. It would hold a fold for hours before slowly returning to its original shape. That gave her a window to work with. A window to fight with. Her first successful creation was simple: a staff. She folded the desk metal along specific stress points, creating a pole about 5 feet long. When she lifted it, she nearly dropped it immediately. The compressed metal weighed over 300 pounds. Any other species would have abandoned the design as impractical. But G1 had grown up on Earth, where humans had been lifting heavy things for their entire existence. She knew about leverage, about balance, about using your whole body instead of just your arms. She practiced with the staff every night, building muscle groups she hadn't known existed. Her hands developed calluses. Her shoulders grew stronger. The warehouse became her private training ground. A month into her experiments, someone found her. Hyan, one of the human maintenance technicians, came down to the warehouse late one evening to retrieve a part and discovered G1 in the middle of a training session. "What are you doing?" he asked, staring at the metal staff in her hands. G1 froze, caught. "I can explain. Is that a desk?" It was a desk. Hyan walked closer, examining the folded metal with professional interest. He was older than G1, maybe 40, with the weathered hands of someone who had spent decades working with tools. "You folded it into a weapon." "I'm trying to. I'm not very good yet. Can I try lifting it?" G1 handed him the staff. Hyan gripped it, pulled, and his eyes went wide. "This thing must weigh 200 kilos. 300. About 660 pounds. And you can lift this?" Hyan looked at her with new respect. "Barely. I'm working on it." Hyan set the staff down carefully and studied G1 with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then he smiled. "Show me how you fold it." That night, G1 gained her first ally. Hyan had spent 20 years working with metals and alloys. He understood stress points and load distribution in ways G1 was still learning. Together, they started refining the designs. They created a blade that unfolded from a compact rectangle, a spear that extended from a cylinder no bigger than a baton, a shield that could flower from a flat panel in seconds. Each design was built around human capabilities, human anatomy, human strength. And each design was heavy enough that no other species could lift it without significant effort. "They'll say it's impractical," Hyan warned one evening as they worked on a new configuration. "Good," G1 replied. "Let them think that." Word began to spread through the Academy's human population about what G1 was doing. Most thought it was a waste of time. Some thought it was sad, a combat washout trying to salvage her pride. But a few, like Hyan and Dr. Tiemann, saw something else. They saw a human doing what humans did best: creating tools. 2 months after being reassigned to logistics, G1 completed her masterpiece. She folded 3 entire desks together, compressing the memory metal into a dense core no thicker than her wrist. The result was a warhammer that weighed over 800 pounds. In its folded state, it looked like a simple baton. When extended, it became something that defied every principle the Academy taught about weapon design. G1 could barely swing it. But that was the point. In combat, You didn't need to swing something 100 times. You just needed to swing it once. She named it quietly to herself in the empty warehouse. Unarmed. Because that's what they had called her. That's what they thought she was. They were about to learn differently. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Borum would be visiting the Galactic Combat Academy for an inspection tour. For most logistics workers, this meant extra cleaning and inventory checks. For G1, it meant something else entirely. Admiral Borum was a legend. The only human to ever command a multi-species fleet. The woman who had won the Battle of Kepler Station using tactics that alien war computers still couldn't fully explain. If anyone understood what humans could do, it was her. G1 didn't plan to approach the Admiral. What would she even say? But fate or luck or something else intervened. The inspection dinner was held in the Academy's Grand Hall. G1 wasn't invited, but she was assigned to coordinate the equipment set up for the event. She arrived early with Hyan, arranging tables and checking audio systems while Academy officials fussed over every detail. Commander Thexal arrived first, his scales polished to a mirror shine. Then the other instructors, followed by the top cadets. Caldrus entered wearing his dress uniform, his gravity hammer displayed ceremonially at his side. Veltara moved through the crowd with casual grace, all forearms gesturing as she spoke with other seraphs. Then Admiral Borum walked in, and the room fell silent. She was smaller than G1 expected. Maybe 5 feet tall, thin, with gray hair cut short and eyes that seemed to notice everything. She wore a simple uniform with more ribbons and medals than G1 could count. When she spoke, her voice carried authority that had nothing to do with volume. Commander Thexal, thank you for hosting me. I'm eager to see what the Academy has accomplished this year. The dinner proceeded with military precision. Speeches were given. Accomplishments were listed. Thexal stood and began describing the Academy's rigorous standards with obvious pride. We maintain the highest combat requirements in the galaxy, he said. Every cadet must demonstrate mastery across multiple weapon systems. We don't compromise our standards for any species. If they cannot meet our requirements, they serve in other capacities where they can contribute meaningfully. Admiral Borum took a sip of water. I see. And how many humans are currently in your combat program? None, Admiral. We had 3 candidates this year, but unfortunately, none met the physical requirements. Unfortunate, Borum repeated, her tone neutral. I seem to recall the Academy said the same thing about my generation 30 years ago. That humans couldn't meet the physical requirements for combat service. Thexal shifted slightly. With respect, Admiral, you serve as a fleet commander. Strategic command is different from frontline combat, is it? Borum set down her glass. The room had gone very quiet. Tell me, Commander, have you studied human military history? I'm familiar with the basics. Then you know that humans spent thousands of years fighting wars with whatever tools we could create. We didn't have natural armor or enhanced strength or energy manipulation abilities. We had hands that could grip things and brains that could solve problems. She paused. And we won. Against predators. Against the environment. Against each other. We won because we created weapons that worked for us, not because we adapted to weapons designed for someone else. Thexal's expression remained carefully neutral. Admiral, with respect, modern combat requires integration with standardized systems. Individual customization would be impractical at scale. Would it? Borum stood. Commander, I propose a demonstration. Allow 1 human cadet to compete in your upcoming Proving Ground tournament using non-standard equipment. If the cadet fails to reach the final rounds, I will personally recommend that the human combat program be permanently discontinued at this academy and all others. The room erupted in murmurs. The Proving Ground was the Academy's most prestigious event, where cadets demonstrated their skills before military recruiters from across the galaxy. It was not a place for experiments, and if the cadet succeeds, Dexal asked, then you redesign your weapons qualification protocols to account for species-specific requirements. You stop expecting everyone to fight like Rexians or Seraphs or Hectors and start letting them fight like themselves. G1's heart was pounding so hard, she thought everyone must be able to hear it. She was standing against the wall, holding a datapad, trying to be invisible. But Admiral Borum's eyes found her anyway. You, what's your name? G1, Admiral. Her voice barely worked. You're logistics now, correct? Formerly combat track? Yes, Admiral. Borum looked at Dexal. This one. I want her in the tournament. Dexal's scales rippled in what might have been surprise or annoyance. Admiral, Cadet G1 failed every weapons qualification. Putting her in the proving ground would be a fair test of whether your standards measure actual combat capability or just conformity. Borum finished. Do we have an agreement, Commander? Dexal was trapped, and he knew it. Refusing the highest-ranking human officer in the galaxy would be a diplomatic disaster. Very well. Cadet G1 may compete. When she fails, I trust this matter will be settled permanently. When she succeeds, Borum corrected, you will acknowledge that there is more than one way to be a warrior. The dinner continued, but G1 heard none of it. Her mind was spinning. The proving ground was in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to prove that her months of secret training had been worth something. After the event ended and then equipment was packed away, Admiral Borum approached G1 directly. You have folded metal training, don't you? G1 stared. How did you? Because I know how humans solve problems. We use what's available. Borum's expression softened slightly. 30 years ago, I was like you. Too weak for standard weapons, they said. So I learned to pilot ships in ways that didn't require strength. I learned to fight battles where physics mattered more than muscles. And I won. I don't know if I can do this, G1 admitted. Good. Uncertainty means you'll prepare properly. Overconfidence is what gets warriors killed. Borum pulled a small card from her pocket and handed it to G1. My personal code. If you need resources or advice, contact me. But understand this. I can't fight this battle for you. You need to prove it yourself. I understand. 2 weeks, Borum said. Show them what human hands can do. That night, G1 returned to the warehouse to find Hyan and Dr. Tiemann waiting for her. Word had already spread about the challenge. They weren't alone. 4 other humans had come, workers from various departments G1 barely knew. We heard, said a woman named Yunji who worked in food services. We want to help. Over the next 2 weeks, G1 trained harder than she ever had in her life. Hyan helped refine her folding techniques, creating configurations she could deploy in seconds instead of minutes. Dr. Tiemann calculated stress points and optimal striking angles. Yunji, who had been a physical therapist on Earth, designed training exercises to build the specific muscles G1 needed. They worked in secret, always in the warehouse after hours. G1 folded and refolded metal until her hands bled, then wrapped them and kept going. She practiced with weapons weighing 300 pounds, 400, 600. Her body adapted. Her muscles grew. Her technique sharpened. Meanwhile, word spread through the academy about the tournament matchup. G1 heard the laughter in the hallways, the jokes about how quickly she would lose. Veltara told anyone who would listen that she hoped to face G1 just to end the embarrassment quickly. Caldrus, the undefeated champion, was more direct. I will request to face the human in the arena, he announced during a training session. It will be over in seconds. Merciful. Let them underestimate her. Let them think she was helpless. Every moment they spent laughing was a moment they weren't preparing for. What she had actually become. On the final night before the tournament, G1 stood in the warehouse surrounded by her creations. A dozen different weapons, each folded from identical sheets of memory metal. Each one designed specifically for human hands, human strength, human ingenuity. And in the center of them all, Unarmed. The 800-pound warhammer that looked like a simple baton until it was too late. Admiral, Warham sent one final message. Remember, you're not fighting to prove you're like them. You're fighting to prove you're something they never expected. Be human. That's your greatest weapon. G1 picked up Unarmed and felt its weight settle into her hands. 2 weeks ago, she could barely lift it. Now it felt like an extension of her own body. Not comfortable, but right. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn that humans didn't need to be born warriors. They just needed to be born with hands that could build weapons and minds that could imagine them. Tomorrow, she would show them what unarmed really meant. The arena was built into the heart of the academy, a circular combat floor surrounded by rising tiers of seats. Every seat was filled. Military recruiters from a dozen species occupied the premium sections, their datapads ready to record impressive performances. Students packed the upper levels, cheering for their favorites. G1 stood in the preparation area beneath the arena, listening to the roar of the crowd above. She was scheduled for the third preliminary match. Around her, other cadets checked their weapons and ran through final preparations. No one spoke to her. Most barely looked at her. She carried Unarmed in its folded form, a simple baton that attracted no attention. Strapped across her back were 3 flat panels of memory metal, each one pre-folded into a configuration she could deploy in seconds. To anyone watching, they looked like armor plating. Only G1 knew what they could become. First match, Cadet Zelkor versus Cadet Tamwin. The crowd roared. G1 watched on a monitor as 2 Hectors entered the arena, their crystalline bodies refracting the lights into rainbow patterns. They fought with energy gauntlets, moving with the slow, deliberate power of their species. The match lasted 4 minutes before Zelkor landed a decisive blow. Second match, Cadet Veltara versus Cadet Quintal. Veltara entered the arena to massive cheers. She was a favorite to win the entire tournament, and her preliminary match proved why. Her forearms moved in patterns too fast to follow, blades striking from every angle. Quintal, a skilled Rexian fighter, never had a chance. Disarmed in 90 seconds. Third match, Cadet G1 versus Cadet Kelvin. The crowd's energy changed. Laughter rippled through the stands. G1 heard someone shout, "How long will she last?" 10 seconds? More laughter. She walked into the arena. The lights were blinding after the dim preparation area. Across from her, Kelvin waited. He was seraph-like Veltara, with forearms and reflexes that made humans look frozen in time. He carried plasma whips, weapons that could strike from 20 feet away with enough heat to melt steel. "Combatants ready," the announcer called. Kelvin raised all 4 whips. The crowd cheered. This would be quick entertainment before the real matches began. Begin. Kelvin attacked immediately, all 4 whips crackling across the distance. G1 didn't try to dodge. Instead, she grabbed one of the flat panels from her back and snapped it open. The memory metal unfolded in less than a second, expanding into a shield 4 feet wide. The plasma whips hit the shield, and their energy dispersed, harmlessly across its surface and into the ground. Kelvin's confidence flickered. He had expected her to run or fall. He adjusted his stance and attacked from a different angle, trying to strike around the shield. G1 didn't give him time. She collapsed the shield with a twist of her wrists and in the same motion refolded it into a javelin. The transformation took 3 seconds. She pulled her arm back and through. The javelin weighed nearly 200 pounds, and G1 had spent weeks building the muscles to throw it properly. It flew across the arena faster than Kelvin could react, slanting into his center mass with enough force to trigger the safety fields. Holographic barriers sprang up around him as the impact sensors registered a lethal strike. Match concluded. Winner, Cadet G1. The arena fell silent. Then, slowly scattered applause began. It wasn't cheering exactly, more like confused acknowledgement that something unexpected had just happened. G1 retrieved her weapon and walked back to the preparation area. Behind her, the crowd buzzed with speculation. Her second match was against Zarn, the crystalline Hector who fought with resonance gauntlets. Zarn had watched her first match carefully. When they entered the arena, he didn't rush in like Kelvin had. He circled, studying her stance. "Your metal folding is impressive," Zarn said, his voice like rocks grinding together. "But my gauntlets can shatter any physical weapon. Let's see how your creativity handles that." G1 pulled Unarmed from her belt. In its baton form, it looked harmless. She extended it with a sharp twist, and the weapon unfolded into a staff 6 feet long. Zarn charged, his gauntlets humming with resonant energy. Their weapons met with a sound like a bell being struck. The resonance wave from Zarn's gauntlets spread through the metal staff. G1 felt the vibration threaten to shake the weapon apart. But she had expected this. She released the staff and pulled a second panel from her back, snapping it into a pair of short blades. Zarn's gauntlet struck her abandoned staff and shattered it into fragments. He turned, confident, and found G1 already moving. She was inside his reach before he could adjust, both blades striking for weak points in his crystalline structure. The safety fields activated. Zarn looked down at where the holographic markers showed lethal strikes, his expression showing something that might have been respect. Winner, Cadet G1. This time, the applause was louder. Still skeptical, but intrigued. The human wasn't supposed to be winning. The quarterfinals put her against a Vrexian named Hector, who wielded a plasma blade with decades of experience. Hector was old by cadet standards, having served in his planet's military before joining the academy. He moved with economy and precision. Every strike calculated. G-1 fought him with a configuration she called the whipstaff, a flexible weapon that could strike from unexpected angles. They fought for nearly 10 minutes, neither gaining a clear advantage. Then Hector made a small mistake, overextending on a thrust. G1 trapped his blade with her whipstaff and used his own momentum to throw him off balance. The safety fields activated as she pressed a blade to his throat. Winner, Cadet G1. Now the crowd was genuinely excited. The impossible was happening. The human was advancing. The semifinals matched her against Veltara. The Seraph entered the arena with all 4 arms carrying molecular disruptors, weapons that could break down matter at the atomic level. She looked at G1 with something that might have been anger or might have been fear of losing to someone she had humiliated months ago. "I won't hold back this time," Veltara said. "Good," G1 replied. The match began. Veltara attacked with everything she had, 4 arms moving in impossible patterns, disruptors firing from every angle. G1 defended with a shield configuration, but Veltara's sustained assault began breaking down the metal's molecular structure. Then G1 did something no one expected. She reached for Unarmed. The 800-pound warhammer unfolded from its baton form slowly, the dense metal expanding section by section. Veltara saw it coming and intensified her attack. Trying to destroy it before the transformation completed. She failed. G1 lifted the completed hammer with both hands, feeling every ounce of its massive weight. Veltara's disruptors chipped at its surface, but the metal was too compressed, too dense to break down quickly. G1 didn't aim for Veltara. She swung the hammer at the arena floor with every bit of strength she had, built over months of training. The impact created a shockwave that rippled across the entire combat floor. Valtara, with her four limbs all in contact with the ground, couldn't adjust quickly enough. The vibration disrupted her balance at 4 points simultaneously. She stumbled, fell, and before she could recover, G1 was there with a quick folded blade at her throat. "Winner, Cadet G1!" The crowd exploded. This wasn't skepticism anymore. This was witnessing something unprecedented. The human with no weapons training was in the finals. G-1 stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard, her arms shaking from the effort of swinging unarmed. Around her, the crowd chanted her name. In the premium seating, Admiral Barham sat with a slight smile, but G1's eyes found the preparation area, where her final opponent waited. Cal Dr is the undefeated champion. 43 consecutive victories. The pride of the Vrexian species and the Academy's greatest warrior. He looked at her across the arena, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in his expression. Only the focused intensity of a warrior who recognized another warrior. Tomorrow would be the finals. Tomorrow would decide everything. G-1 left the arena to thunderous applause, but her mind was already working on the problem of Caldress. He had watched all her matches. He knew her techniques now. The element of surprise was gone. All she had left was what she had started with: human hands. A mind that could solve problems, and a weapon no one else could lift. It would have to be enough. The morning of the finals, G1 woke at dawn in the warehouse. She had stopped sleeping in the cadet quarters weeks ago, preferring the quiet space among her creations. Hyan found her there, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Unarmed across her lap. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Thinking," G1 replied. "Caldress is different from the others. He's not going to underestimate me. He's watched every match. He knows my techniques, so change them. In one day?" Hyan sat down beside her. "You're thinking about this wrong. You don't need new techniques. You need to remember what makes you dangerous in the first place." He picked up one of her practice weapons. "Every other species here trains with weapons their ancestors used for thousands of years. They perfect techniques that were already established. You invented everything you're using in less than 6 months. That's your advantage: improvisation. Caldress has 43 wins. He's never lost. Neither had Valtara in the preliminaries. Neither had any of them against you." Hyan smiled. "You're thinking like they do now. Like victory comes from perfecting a single technique. But humans don't work that way. We adapt. We change. We use whatever works in the moment." G1 looked at Unarmed, then at the other weapons scattered around the warehouse. Hyan was right. She had been so focused on matching Caldress's skill that she had forgotten the lesson that got her this far. She didn't need to fight like them. The arena was even more packed for the finals than it had been for the preliminaries. Military recruiters filled every premium seat. The student sections were standing room only. Word had spread across the entire Academy network. The human versus the champion. The impossible matchup. In the preparation area, G1 strapped on her equipment. Unarmed at her belt. 3 panels across her back. But she also grabbed something else. A 4th panel she hadn't used in competition yet. One she and Hyan had finished just last night. It was thinner than the others, folded differently. An experiment. Caldress was already in the arena when she entered. He stood at the center, his gravity hammer resting on his shoulder. The weapon hummed with barely contained power. Caldress himself looked calm, focused. He had the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The crowd's roar was deafening. G1 walked to her starting position, her heart pounding but her hands steady. She had come too far to doubt herself now. "Combatants ready." The announcer called. They both nodded. "This is the final match of this year's proving ground. The winner will have their choice of military appointments from the finest forces in the galaxy. Begin. Caldrus didn't rush in. He circled slowly, studying G1's stance, watching for tells. G1 mirrored his movement, keeping her distance. They circled each other like planets in orbit, each waiting for the right moment. Caldrus moved first. He charged forward with surprising speed for his size, the gravity hammer swinging in a wide arc. G1 pulled Unarmed and extended it, meeting his strike with her own. The collision echoed across the arena like thunder. Neither weapon broke. Neither fighter fell. The crowd went absolutely silent. Caldrus's eyes widened slightly. No one had ever blocked his hammer directly before. Everyone either dodged or got crushed. But G1's weapon, designed specifically for human leverage and compressed to impossible density, held firm. They broke apart and circled again. Caldrus attacked twice more, each time with more force. Each time, G1 met him blow for blow. But she could feel her arms shaking. Unarmed was heavy, and every impact rattled through her entire body. Caldrus was stronger. He could keep this up longer than she could. 5 minutes in, G1's strategy changed. She stopped meeting his attacks head-on and started using Unarmed defensively, deflecting instead of blocking. Caldrus adjusted, trying to overwhelm her with the speed and power of his strikes. 10 minutes. G1's breathing was labored. Caldrus was breathing hard too, but less so. The gravity hammer required constant energy manipulation, a skill that drained even Vrexians, but his stamina was superior to hers. 15 minutes. The crowd was going wild, but G1 barely heard them. Her world had narrowed to Caldrus, his hammer, and the split-second decisions of combat. Then Caldrus made his mistake. He had been watching G1's matches. He had seen how her weapons worked, how she used them, and he had developed a counter-strategy. If he could get his hands on her weapon, if he could prove that a Vrexian could lift what she lifted, it would break her psychological advantage. He saw his chance when G1's grip on Unarmed shifted during a deflection. Moving faster than G1 expected, Caldrus released his own hammer and grabbed for hers with both hands. His hands closed around Unarmed's shaft. He pulled. 800 pounds of compressed memory metal didn't move. Caldrus pulled harder, his muscles straining. The weapon shifted slightly, but stayed in G1's grip. It wasn't that he couldn't lift it eventually. He probably could, with enough effort. But in combat, eventually was too long. And in that moment of overconfidence, G1 moved. She released Unarmed entirely, letting Caldrus's own pulling force throw him off balance. Her hands flashed to her back, grabbing the experimental fourth panel. It unfolded in less than a second into something she had never used before, a blade. But thin and flexible like paper. The blade scored a touch across Caldrus's center mass. So light he barely felt it. The arena's safety systems didn't trigger. Caldrus recovered his balance, confused. That should have been a killing blow by tournament rules, but the sensors hadn't registered it. Then G1 touched the blade to his throat, and this time the sensors caught up. They had simply been too surprised by the weapon's thinness to register the first strike. Match concluded. Winner, Cadet G1. The arena exploded with noise. Cheering, shouting, disbelief. G1 stood there, breathing hard, barely able to process what had happened. She had won. Against the undefeated champion, she had won. Caldrus looked at her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He bowed. A full Vrexian formal bow, showing respect to a superior warrior. I have never been defeated, he said quietly, audible only to her beneath the crowd's roar. I thought I understood what made a warrior. I was wrong. You taught me that today. You're still stronger than me, G1 replied honestly. Strength is not the same as being a warrior. I know that now. He looked at Unarmed. still lying on the arena floor. May I try to lift it? Properly this time, not in combat? G1 nodded. Calders walked over to the hammer, gripped it with both hands, and pulled. His muscles strained. The weapon lifted a few inches, then a few more. With immense effort, he raised it to waist height before setting it down again. How do you fight with this? He asked, amazed. Practice. And knowing that I don't need to swing it 100 times. Just once. The award ceremony was held immediately after. G1 stood on the winner's platform, still exhausted, while Commander Dexel presented her with the champion's medal. His expression was carefully neutral, but there was something in his eyes that might have been respect. Cadet G1 has demonstrated exceptional combat ability, he announced to the crowd. As per Admiral Borum's agreement, the Academy will begin developing species-specific weapon protocols. Admiral Borum stepped forward. Cadet G1, you have proven what I've always believed, that innovation defeats specification. On behalf of the Galactic Defense Force, I offer you a position in a new experimental combat unit. Humans only, equipped with custom-designed variable weapons. Will you accept? Yes, Admiral. The crowd cheered again. Military recruiters swarmed forward with datapads and offers. But G1 barely saw them. Her eyes found Hyan and Dr. Tiemann in the crowd, both grinning. Behind them stood other humans from the Academy, people she had worked with in logistics and maintenance. They were cheering the loudest later that evening. After the ceremony and the congratulations and the formal dinners, G1 returned to the warehouse one final time. Admiral Borum found her there, examining her weapons. You're leaving for Earth next week, Borum said. We're setting up the new unit's training facility there. Hyan has agreed to come as master fabricator. Dr. Tamman will lead the research division. What about the other humans here? G1 asked. Some will transfer to the new program. Others will stay here, but with new protocols in place. You've changed things, Gawan. Not just for you, but for every human who comes after. G1 picked up Unarmed, feeling its familiar weight. They said I came unarmed to the Academy, and you proved them wrong. You came with the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Human hands that can create tools, and a human mind that can imagine them. Borum smiled. That's what we do, isn't it? We don't adapt to the universe. We make the universe adapt to us. 3 months later, G1 stood in a training facility on Earth, teaching a class of 20 human cadets the basics of combat origami. Among them was Minho, a young man who had failed plasma rifle qualification 4 times. He held a sheet of memory metal awkwardly, unsure where to begin. G-1 demonstrated the first fold, the foundation that everything else built from. You don't need to be born with a weapon, she told the class, repeating the words that had changed everything for her. You just need to be born with the ability to make one. Across the room, Hyan worked with another student on stress point calculations. Dr. Tiemann explained the molecular properties of different metals. And on the wall, displayed in a case of honor,